Now, especially with how expensive most US-based companies, stocks, and ETFs have gotten over the last year or so, there might be a better argument than ever to gain some global exposure into your portfolio, whether it's buying single stocks and or international-based ETFs. Now, although my portfolio, I own most stocks and ETFs that track companies in the USA, I do think that there might be some potential upside if you were to invest in the right international exposure as well. Now in this video, we're going to go through a new to me ETF that does offer a cover call strategy and tracks different names that are offering international exposure. The ETF provider is very familiar, one of my favorites, and the track record of the ETF looks pretty good as of so far. So if you're an investor that's looking for a decent starting dividend yield and some upside along with some international exposure, then make sure to stick around, drop a like down below, and let's get right into this ETF. If you are a dividend investor who wants to level up your portfolio, you need to be tracking your dividend income consistently. And that's why I created the perfect dividend tracker that I've used to scale my dividend income up to all-time highs over the last year. Now, along with this dividend tracker, you're also going to receive my A to Z dividend investing ebook, which shows you how I personally started from $0 several years ago to now where I earn over $7,500 per month in dividends. So if you want this tracker and the ebook, go to the first link down below in my description and grab it today. So the ETF that we're talking about in today's video is again a new to me ETF. I really haven't dug too deep into this one, at least not as I can remember. I'm talking about ticker symbol IDVO, or the Amplify CWP International Enhanced Dividend Income ETF. And this is brought to us by Amplify ETFs, which of course made ETFs like QDVO or one of my very favorites, DIVO. Now for me personally, I don't necessarily want too much international exposure, but again, I do think with how frothy the overall US market has got as of recently, I think some international exposure might be helpful and might provide some more upside than that of US companies and ETFs that are already trading at sky high valuations. So for that reason alone, I wanted to look a little bit deeper into this one and see how it works, what it offers, and of course, try to decide on whether or not I want to add some to my portfolio. Now to dig a little bit deeper into the Amplify ETF's IDVO, looking into the fact sheet, it says right here, a proven approach to international high quality equity income, IDVO is designed to offer monthly income while providing high risk adjusted returns through high quality international companies. It also says IDVO seeks to provide a gross annual income of approximately 3 to 4% from dividend income and 2 to 4% from option premium. So far it sounds sort of similar to the other Amplify style ETFs. This ETF is trying to provide some upside but also some income along the way, which for me personally is exactly what I'm more or less looking for. Now it says reasons to invest. Number one, 2 potential income streams. IDVO seeks to provide income from international dividend paying stocks and buy opportunistically, writing cover calls on those stocks. So again, very much so similar to that of QDVO and even DIVO. It's a small basket of holdings, 48 holdings as of right now. And then with writing individual cover calls and individual stocks, there's the potential to earn a lot of premium, which of course can be paid to us investors in the form of income. Now number two, it says seek to lower volatility, dividend and option income, reduce share price volatility versus the overall market during times of broad-based market declines. So this is going to be helpful, especially if some of the underlying names in this ETF, for example, trade sideways or even down. The cover call overlay is definitely going to help at least earn a lot more income during those times. Now lastly, it says professionally managed, access a professionally managed dividend and option income international investment strategy through the efficiency of an ETF. Now this is important because of course you and I can buy 48 different stocks, sell individual cover calls in them, and do basically the same thing that this actively managed ETF is going to do. But again, some of the names here, these are professionals that are going to be doing it for you, all for the cheap expense ratio of 0.66%. Now going through some of the top 10 holdings, to be completely honest with you guys, I'm not very familiar with any of these. And again, international exposure is not really something that I personally have added to my portfolio as of yet, but again, I'm open to anything. Now the top weighted company as of now is ticker symbol SAP or SAP SE. Number 2 is CCJ. Number 3 is RELX. Number 4 is BABA, if we're familiar with that one. Then we have IBN, we have CNQ, PM, of course familiar with that. We have NVS, TEVA, and RACE. So all in all, like I always say, when investing into an ETF, you need to be sure that you do want exposure to the top holdings, along with all the holdings, and be aware of the strategy of the ETF, and ask yourself, is this something I want exposure to? Now, the great thing about buying into an ETF that's professionally managed, especially by a provider that you might or might not believe in, I personally do like Amplify ETFs because I like some of the other products that they offer. That alone gives me sort of somewhat confidence into buying into something, even sort of blindly, that's offering international exposure into an ETF. But again, do your own research and ask yourself, is this something that you want? Now, overall, looking at the performance of this ETF, which we're going to look a little bit deeper into very soon here, but it says so far 0.63% as far as 1 month, year to date around 12%, since inception around 39.28%. Now, annualized, this is around 17.42% since inception. So like I promised, this ETF has not done bad whatsoever, which again gave me even more confidence in looking into it a little bit deeper. Now, this is also going to be especially important, again, because a lot of us probably don't have all that much international exposure. Again, I'm not trying to speak for everyone, but again, I know a lot of us pretty much invest in more or less the same stuff. So as far as the country allocation, there's around 16% of this ETF in the UK, then we have 11% in Canada, 7% in Brazil and Germany, we have 5% in India, Mexico, United States, Japan, 4% in Argentina, China, and Spain, Colombia, South Korea, and 3% in Switzerland and other countries at 16%. So it then goes into the active management selection process. It says IDVO identifies American depository receipts or ADRs of high quality large cap companies from the MSCI or the ACWI EX USA index with historical dividend and earnings growth. It then goes through the sector allocation, the security selection, and the tactical cover call writing, which is sort of what we talked about earlier. But all in all, it looks like there's sort of a strenuous screening that these stocks have to go through in order to become a part of the underlying. And then of course, those 30 to 50 different names are going to have cover calls written on some of them. Now, this ETF is especially interesting to me because although I do possibly want some international exposure, I'm not exactly sure on how much international growth is going to happen in the next few years. So by investing into something like this, you're sort of banking on the fact that even if these names trade somewhat sideways, with the use of the cover calls, this ETF is going to yield a decent amount, which we're going to talk about here in a second, and have some upside also. Now, to look a little bit deeper into the performance of IDVO, over the 1 year time frame, it's up 8.16%. On the max time frame, this ETF since around September 5th, 2022, is up around 18.55%. Now, this is one of the main reasons I really haven't bothered with much international exposure in my portfolio. Not to say that there isn't upside, and not to say that there isn't individual companies or ETFs that are going to do amazing, but for the most part, by buying into things that track the S&P or the NASDAQ, it just seems like there's just as much or more upside, if you ask me. Now, even though this ETF has grown like I shared with you guys, over time, it's also paid a nice steady amount of income that's also been growing. Around 5.89% trailing 12-month dividend yield, but on top of that, as you can see on the max time frame, as far as dividends go, 16 cents, 15 cents, 14 cents before then, and basically since inception, this ETF has slightly been increasing their payouts, which is of course what we want to see. Now, another thing that I like about abbvie ETFs is that their payouts are very consistent, at least from what I've seen historically from some of their income producers. And like I mentioned a minute ago, the cool thing about buying into something like IDVO, once again, is because you do have some upside exposure because, of course, this ETF tracks international individual stock names. Whether or not you're interested or even know what they are, just like I was saying, is to be determined. But either way, there is some potential upside. Again, maybe even more growth than some of the US-based ETFs because, again, the US stock market has done so well in the last year or so. So all in all, my takeaway for the abbvie CWP International Enhanced Dividend Income ETF, or ticker symbol IDVO, is that as far as gaining international exposure, this is probably one of my favorite ETFs that I would honestly consider adding to my portfolio. The real question is, do I really want international exposure, or do I want to continue to build out positions like SCHD, like ticker symbol VIG, VYM, etc., etc.? And honestly, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm not opposed to earning around a 6% yield with some potential upside and really diversifying my overall portfolio by having some international exposure into some individual stocks that I honestly have no idea what they even are. But now lastly, before I go, I want to hear from you guys down below, as far as getting some international exposure through buying into IDVO, is this something that you personally would do in your portfolio? Let me know yes or no in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like on it and subscribe for more future content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.